Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Book 2 by J.K. Rowling. The worst birthday. Not for the first time. An argument had broken out over breakfast at number 4 Privet Drive. Mr. Vernon Dursley had been woken up early hours of the morning by a loud, hooting noise from his nephew Harry's room. "Third time this week!" he roared across the table. "If you can't control that owl, it'll have to go." Harry tried yet again to explain. "She's bored," he said. "She's used to flying around outside. If I could just let her out at night." "Do I look stupid?" snarled Uncle Vernon, a bit of fried egg dangling from his bushy mustache. "I know what'll happen if that owl lets out." He exchanged dark looks with his wife Petunia. Harry tried to argue, but his words were drowned out by the long, loud belch from Dursley's son, Dudley. "I want more bacon." "There's more in the frying pan, sweetums," said Aunt Petunia, turning misty eyes on her massive son. "We must build you up. While we've got the chance. I don't like the sound of that school food." "Nonsense, Petunia. I've never went hungry when I was at Smeltings," said Uncle Vernon heartily. "Dudley gets enough, don't you, son?" Dudley, who had so large bottom drooped over either side of the kitchen chair, grinned and turned to Harry. "Pass the frying pan." "You've got to say the magic word," said Harry irritably. The effect of this simple sentence on the rest of the family was incredible. Dudley gasped, fell off his chair, and crashed and shook the whole kitchen. Mr. Dursley gave a small scream, or Mrs. Dursley gave a small scream and clapped her hands over her mouth. Mr. Dursley jumped to his feet, veins throbbing in his temples. "I meant please," said Harry quickly. "I didn't mean—" "What have I told you?" thundered Uncle, spraying spit over the table. "About saying the M word in our house." "But I—" "How dare you threaten Dudley?" roared Uncle Vernon, pounding the table with his fist. "I warned you. I will not tolerate the mention of your abnormality under this roof." Harry stared at his purple-faced uncle and his pale aunt, who was trying to heave Dudley onto his feet. "All right," said Harry, "all right." Uncle Vernon sat back, breathing like a winded rhinoceros and watching Harry closely out of the corner of his small, sharp eyes. Ever since Harry had come home from the summer holidays, Uncle Vernon had been treating him like a bomb that might go off at any moment, because Harry Potter wasn't a normal boy. As a matter of fact, he was not normal he was as not normal as possibly be. Harry Potter was a wizard fresh from his first year at Hogwarts, School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and if the Dursleys were unhappy to have him back for the holidays, it was nothing of how Harry felt. He missed Hogwarts so much it was like having a constant stomach ache. He missed the castle, with its secret passages and ghosts, his classes, though perhaps not Snape, and the potions master, the mail arriving by owl, eating banquets at the great hall, sleeping on his four-poster bed in the tower dormitory, visiting the gamekeeper Hagrid and his cabin next to the Forbidden Forest in the grounds, and especially Quidditch. For a most popular sport in Wizarding World, 6 tall goalposts, 4 flying balls, and 14 players on broomsticks. All Harry's spellbooks, his wands, robes, cauldron, and top-of-the-line Nimbus 2000 broomsticks had been locked in a cupboard under the stairs by Uncle Vernon the instant Harry had come home. What did the Dursleys care if Harry had lost his place on the house Quidditch team because he hadn't practiced all summer? What was it to the Dursleys if Harry went back to school without any of his homework done? The Dursleys were the wizards called Muggles, not a drop of magic blood in their veins. And as far as they were concerned, having a wizard in the family was a matter of the deepest shame. Uncle Vernon had even padlocked Harry's owl, Hedwig, inside her cage to stop her from carrying messages to anyone in the wizarding world. Harry looked nothing like the rest of the family. Uncle Vernon was large and neckless, with an enormous black mustache, and Petunia was horse-faced and bony. Dudley was blond, pink, and porky. Harry, on the other hand, was small and skinny, with brilliant green eyes and jet black hair that was always untidy. He wore round glasses, and on his forehead was a thin, lightning-shaped scar. It was the scar that made Harry so particularly unusual, even for a wizard. This scar was the only hint of Harry's very mysterious past, for of the reason that he had been left on Dursley's doorsteps 11 years before. At the age of 1 year old, Harry somehow survived a curse from the greatest dark sorcerer of all time, Lord Voldemort, whose name most witches and wizards still feared to speak. Harry's parents had died in Voldemort's attack, but Harry had escaped with a lightning scar, and somehow, nobody understood why, Voldemort's powers had been destroyed the instant he had failed to kill Harry. So Harry had been brought up by the dead mother's sister and her husband. He had spent 10 years with the Dursleys, never understanding why he kept making odd things happen without meaning to, believing the Dursley story that he had gotten a scar in a car crash that had killed his parents. And then exactly 1 year ago at Hogwarts had written to Harry, and the whole story had come out. Harry had taken up his place at the wizard school, where he had a scar was famous. But the school year was over, and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer. Back to being treated like a dog that had been rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes hadn't been high. They'd never given him a real present, let alone a cake. But ignoring it completely? At that moment, Uncle Vernon cleared his throat importantly and said, "Now, we all know what today is, a very important day." Harry looked up, hardly daring to believe it. "This could well be the day I make the biggest deal of my career," said Uncle Vernon. Harry went back to his toast. Of course, he thought bitterly. Uncle Vernon was talking about some stupid dinner party. He'd been talking about nothing else for 2 weeks. Some rich builder and his wife were coming to dinner, and Uncle Vernon was hoping to get a huge order from him. Uncle Vernon's company made drills. "I think we should run through the schedule one more time," said Uncle Vernon. "We should all be in position at 8 o'clock. Petunia will be—" "I will be in the lounge," said Petunia promptly, "waiting to welcome them graciously to our home." "Good. And Dudley?" "I'll be waiting to open the door," Dudley said, a foul, simping smile. "May I take your coats, Mrs. and Mr. Masons?" "Oh, they'll love him!" cried Aunt Petunia rapturously. "Excellent, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon. Then he rounded to Harry. "And you?" "I'll be in my bedroom, making no noise at all, pretending that I'm not there," said Harry tonelessly. "Exactly," said Uncle Vernon nastily. "I will lead them into the lounge, introduce you, Petunia, and pour them drinks. At 8:15, I'll announce dinner," said Aunt Petunia. "And Dudley, you'll say—" "May I take you through the dining room, Mrs. Mason?" said Dudley, offering his fat arm as an invisible woman. "My perfect little gentleman," sniffed Aunt Petunia. "And you?" said Uncle Harry viciously to Harry. "I'll be in my room, making no noise at all, and pretending I'm not there," said Harry dully. "Precisely. Now, we should aim to get a few good compliments into dinner. Petunia, any ideas?" "Vernon tells me you're a wonderful golfer, Mr. Mason. Do tell me where you brought your dress, Mrs. Mason." "Perfect, Dudley. How about we had to write an essay about our hero at school, Mr. Mason, and I wrote about you." This was too much for both Aunt Petunia and Harry. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and hugged her son, while Harry ducked under the table so they wouldn't see him laughing. "And you, boy?" Harry fought to keep his face straight as he emerged. "I'll be in my room, making no noise and pretending that I'm not there," he said. "Too right you will," said Uncle Vernon forcefully. The Masons don't know anything about you, and it's going to stay that way. When dinner's over, you take Mrs. Mason back to the lounge for coffee. Petunia and I'll bring up the subject about drills. With any luck, I'll have the deal signed and sealed before the news at 10. We'll be shopping for vacation homes in Medjugorje this time tomorrow. Harry couldn't feel too excited about this. He didn't think Dursleys would like him any better in Majorca than they did in Privet Drive. Right. I'm off to town to pick up the dinner jackets for Dudley and me, and you, he snarled at Harry, you will stay out of your aunt's way while she is cleaning. Harry left through the back door. It was a brilliant sunny day. He crossed the lawn, slumped down on the garden bench, and sang under his breath, Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me. No cards, no presents. He wouldn't be spending the evening pretending not to exist. He gazed miserably into the hedge. He had never felt so lonely. More than anything else at Hogwarts, more than ever than playing Quidditch, Harry missed his best friends Ron and Weasley and Hermione Granger. They, however, didn't seem to be missing him at all. Neither of them had written him all summer, even though Ron said he was going to ask Harry to come out and stay. Countless times Harry had been to the point of unlocking Hedwig's cage by magic, sending her to Ron and Hermione with a letter, but it wasn't worth the risk. You underage wizards weren't allowed to use magic outside of school. Harry hadn't told the Dursleys this. He knew that their terror that he might turn them into dung beetles that stopped them from locking him in the cupboard under the stairs with his wand and broomstick. For the first time in couple weeks back, Harry had enjoyed muttering nonsense words under his breath, watching Dudley tearing out of the room as fast as his fat legs would carry him. But the long silence from Ron and Hermione had made Harry feel so cut off from the magical world that even the Dudley had lost its appeal, and Ron and Hermione had forgotten his birthday. What wouldn't he give for a message from Hogwarts, from any witch or wizard? He'd almost be glad at the sight of his archenemy Draco Malfoy, just to be sure it wasn't all a dream. Now that the whole year at Hogwarts had been fun, at the very end of the term Harry had come face to face with none other than Lord Voldemort himself. Voldemort may have ruined his former self, but he was still terrifying and still cunning and still determined to regain power. Harry had slipped through Voldemort's clutches for a second time, but it had been a narrow escape, and even now, weeks later, Harry kept waking in the night, drenched in a cold sweat, wondering where Voldemort was now, remembering his livid face, his wide, mad eyes. Harry suddenly sat bolt upright on the garden bench. He had been staring absent-mindedly into the hedge, and the hedge was staring back. 2 enormous green eyes had appeared among his leaves. Harry jumped up to his feet, and a jeering voice floated across the lawn. I know what day it is, sang Dudley, waddling towards him. The huge eyes blinked and vanished. What? Said Harry, taking his eyes off the spot where they had been. I know what day it is, Dudley repeated, coming right up to him. Well done, said Harry. So you finally learned the days of the week? Today's your birthday, sneered Dudley. How come you haven't gotten any cards? Haven't you got any friends, that freak place? Better not let your mum hear you talking about my school, said Harry coolly. Dudley hitched up his trousers, which were slipping down his fat bottom. Why are you staring at the hedge? He said suspiciously. I'm trying to decide what would be the best spell to set it on fire, said Harry. Dudley stumbled backward at once and took panic from his face. You can't. Dad said you weren't allowed to do magic. He said he'll chuck you out of the house. And you haven't got anywhere to go. You haven't got any friends to take you. Jiggery pokery, said Harry in a fierce voice. Hocus pocus squiggly miggly. Mom! Howled Dudley, tripping over his feet, and dashed back towards the house. Mom! He's doing you no what? Harry paid dearly for that moment of fun, as neither Dudley nor the hedge in any way hurt, Aunt Petunia knew he hadn't really done magic. but he still had to duck as she aimed a heavy blow at his head with a soapy ring frying pan. With that, she gave him work to do, with the promise that he wouldn't eat again until he'd finished. When Dudley lolled around watching and eating ice cream, Harry cleaned the windows, washed the car, mowed the lawn, trimmed the flower beds, pruned the watered the roses, and repainted the garden bench. The sun blazed overhead, burning the back of his neck. Harry knew it wouldn't have risen to Dudley's bait, but Dudley had said the very thing that Harry had been thinking himself. Maybe he didn't have any friends at Hogwarts. Wish they could see famous Harry Potter now, he thought savagely, as he spread the manure in the flower beds, his back aching, sweat running down his face. It was 7:30 in the evening, when at last, exhausted, he heard Aunt Petunia calling him. "Get in here and walk on the newspaper." Harry moved gladly into the shade in the gleaming kitchen. On top of the fridge stood tonight's pudding, a huge mound of whipped cream and sugared violets. A lion roast pork was sizzling in the oven. "Eat quickly, the Masons will be here soon," snapped Aunt Petunia, pointing to 2 slices of bread and a lump of cheese on the kitchen table. She was already wearing salmon pink cocktail dress. Harry washed his hands, bolted down his pitiful supper, and the moment he had finished, Aunt Petunia whisked away his plate. "Upstairs, Harry!" As he passed the door to the living room, Harry caught a glimpse of Uncle Vernon and Dudley's bow ties at the dinner jackets. He had only just reached the upstairs landing, and the doorbell rang, and Uncle Vernon's furious face appeared at the foot of the stairs. "Remember, boy, one sound." Harry crossed to his bedroom on tiptoe, slipped inside, closed the door, and turned and collapsed on his bed. The trouble was, there was already somebody sitting on it.